Have you ever felt God ask you to do something risky? Have you ever felt him ask you to take a leap of faith? Against your better judgment, have you ever said yes? Have you felt the thrill after saying yes of watching God work in powerful ways? But if you also experience trials, even trauma, ones that make you doubt your decision, doubt yourself, even doubt God. Have you ever experienced a trauma so deep that it feels like God asked you to take that leap of faith, only to drop you when you did? In 2003, I felt like God asked me to take the biggest leap of faith in my life. I was living in a great town called Valencia, California. It's a perfect suburb of Los Angeles. City of Commerce just recently called itself Awesome Town because there's basically a Starbucks on every corner. The streets are well landscaped, and it was a great life we were living. My wife and I had 4 young children, went to a great church, worked for a great company, and things were good. But on a donor trip to El Salvador, I felt like God was asking us to take a risk, to leave it all, and to serve him there. He asked us to leave it behind, and I wrestled with it a bit. But I wanted to know what it felt like to take that leap of faith. I wanted to exercise my faith. So in 2004, 2005, we sold our house, most of our belongings, and we moved to El Salvador to work with a ministry that served poor communities through local churches. Honestly, it was a rush. There's nothing in this world like feeling what it's like to say yes to Jesus and to do something for him and for his kingdom. Doors opened up, funding came in, our church got behind us, our company got behind us. And yeah, there were challenges, but they were small in comparison to watching God move. The first year living in El Salvador, it was tough a little bit. Country was dangerous. We didn't speak much Spanish. I knew how to ask where to go to the bathroom. ¿Dónde está el baño? My kids struggled a little bit. But after about a year, things started to come together. My Spanish improved. Our community began to form. The ministry started to take off, and it felt like God had everything covered. On January 18th, 2007, I woke up around 4:30 to take our team to the east side of the country where we were building a clinic in a town called Avelinas. The town rests about 4 hours outside of San Salvador, near the mountains, near Honduras. El Salvador is gorgeous in January. And although Avelinas was very poor, that morning everything seemed beautiful. The church we worked with was on the move. And I heard that morning story after story of what God was doing. Things were changing, getting better because of Jesus, because of his church. I felt like I was living a page out of the New Testament. Around 2 p.m., we left to go back to San Salvador. And I was driving my truck with 4 other passengers through some tough terrain. And we came around a corner, and a man in a ski mask jumped out immediately and started screaming. And he pointed a gun right at my head, and he started shooting directly into the vehicle. The first bullet hit me directly in the neck. The other bullets missed everywhere else in the car. One of our team members pulled me out. We all laid down, listening to the other bullets from another gun. I grasped my throat, and I struggled to get to the side of the road. I knelt down, thinking it was it. After the shooters fled, I was put back in the truck and raced to a local clinic. When I got to the clinic, I was sure I was going to die there. They rolled me in. I looked at the faces of the people taking care of me. They didn't seem hopeful. They even sent a nun in to try to convert me. I held gauze on my neck, and they literally asked me to walk around to take x-rays. I felt like I was in a lineup. And I even had to coordinate to get the helicopter to come to take me back to San Salvador. I started telling people what to do. And because we had a friend at the embassy, they were able to get a military helicopter about 3 hours after I had been shot. But to land, they had to close a high security prison that had riots that week just to use that field. And then when they finally got me into the helicopter, they started to take off. And for some reason, they forgot to strap me down. So as we took off, I almost slid out of the helicopter. I can laugh about that now. We got to San Salvador after about an hour flight. They finally got me to the emergency room. And after a series of tests, they found the bullet. It had entered my neck, and it had passed my jugular and my trachea by a centimeter, lodging in my esophagus. But they had to get it out. And as I waited for surgery, and just for good measure, the hospital began to shake, and the city was rocked with a 6.0 earthquake. 9 hours after the shooting, they rolled me out of the recovery room. They were able to remove the bullet. And 2 weeks later, I walked out of the hospital. My life had been spared. I obviously had experienced a miracle, a testament to God's protection. But it also hurt. I felt tremendous pain. And to this day, I still struggle with a permanent paralysis, my vocal cords. My trust to responding to God's call had been rocked to its core. When I had my kids and they were really young, I used to tell them to get to the edge of the couch. I would ask them to jump to me, and they would jump, and I would hold them, put them back, and I'd step back a little further and ask them to jump, and they would jump again, and I'd step back a little bit more, and I'd catch them and just hold them. I used to picture God like this, a playful father daring me to trust him. For a long while, it felt like I could take bigger and bigger leaps of faith, and he'd always come through. Then he asked me to serve in El Salvador, to take a bullet, and to lose my voice. In El Salvador, it felt for a while like he had dropped me. But I've learned that this picture of trusting God was not the full picture. Yes, he asked me to take a leap of faith, but he doesn't just taunt me to trust him with these leaps. Instead, Jesus invites me to join him. He invites me to play and work with him for the purpose of his Father. The picture instead is of that of Jesus when he asked Simon and Andrew to follow him. Remember in Mark when he says to them, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." He invites them and he invites you to join the work that he is up to bring heaven to earth. We often talk about joining the cause, making a difference, saving the orphan, building the kingdom. But we can't accept this invitation to join Jesus without remembering that he said it will cost us. He promised us there would be trials. Why? Because what we're trying to do is really difficult. We have opposition. Some of us are so eager to do the difficult work with Jesus, but then we struggle with doubt when trials come. I know I do. But if you listen to Jesus, you'll learn that trials and trauma don't invalidate what you've been called to. That most of the time, they actually confirm it. But we're not just promised trials. We are promised his presence. When Jesus charged the disciples before leaving heaven, he said, "I am always with you." Isn't that great news? I've never felt the presence of God like I did when I thought I was dying. On the road from that clinic, Psalms 23 rang in my head over and over and over. For you are always with me. I could literally feel the arms of Jesus wrapped around me in the truck as we drove away from the shooting. I've never felt as safe to this day. If you're looking for assurance, for safety, you will find it most when you've trusted him the most. You want to be where Jesus is, doing what Jesus is doing. We've been together the last couple of days seeking what it means to care for the most vulnerable kids in our world. And some of you, many of you, have taken huge risks in your life to respond to God's invitation. I get the chance to be a part of a ministry that adopts abandoned babies from some of the worst circumstances. And one of our adoptive families last week was sharing. She described to me the long road it took to adopt her twins. Years of praying over the decision, wrestling the commitment it would take to adopt from Haiti, a very tough place. Then once they decided, almost 3 years of agonizing waiting. She actually described the last 12 months as if they were labor pains. And it was so intense that she ended up in the hospital for anxiety. When the twins came home, one of the boys spent the first months fighting, kicking, fighting with her, throwing fits of rage. And one of her youngest daughters couldn't take it anymore and said, "Mama, can we send them home?" But the mom told me that every time the little boy would scream and hit her, she only grew in her resolve to love him unconditionally. Almost a full year later, this little guy is thriving. And she says that through it all, she and her family have learned what it's like to truly trust Jesus and to love like Jesus. She said that she now has a glimpse of what Jesus must experience when we kick and scream and try to go our own way. If we are truly going to serve the orphan, the foster child, the abused, forgotten one, we have to prepare ourselves for this challenge. Tonight, I want to encourage you from my story that joining Jesus in his work is so worth it. It is so worth it. And it will come with trials, even trauma. But instead of running from it or trying to avoid it, we should expect it. But when it comes, we must remember that the most secure place to be is right next to Jesus. He is the one going after every orphan child. He's the one leading the charge. Our invitation is to follow him and to join him. And if we do, the trials, the tribulation, the trauma that we face actually can encourage us instead of discouraging us. So take courage during your trauma. Know that he is with you and that he is for you. Be confident that you're doing exactly what he's asked you to do. Rejoice that you get to work alongside our Savior and that he always wins. And take security in knowing that you're in the safest place you can be when you have trusted him and acted in faith. Thank you so much for letting me share my story tonight. Good night.